Okay, so first of all, hi everybody. Thank you guys so much for coming out. We have such an exciting event for you today. My name is Chinmaya. I'm the workshops director over at ACM Design. And this event we got today is something that's been in the works for a while, but we're just so happy that we can finally deliver to you guys. So this is a version of or like an iteration of our UXLA series where we talk about the world of UX and product design or UX research as well. And we basically create a bunch of workshops surrounding that. And for this edition, we're lucky enough to have three incredibly talented designers from none other than Reddit to join us. And fun fact, they're also UCLA alumni. So yeah, I mean, it's such an honor to have you guys here. Thank you guys so much for coming. Yeah, so let's just start with some quick introductions. So whoever wants to go first can feel free to go first. So like I'll just ask what do you do at Reddit, and what's your favorite subreddit? I want to know more about you.
I'll kick things off. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. First off, it's awesome to be here. I really appreciate Chinmaya inviting us, Bijun connecting us with you all. Super cool to talk to you all even over Zoom. We definitely peeped the ACM website ahead of time and we're like, oh shit, they have like a design system, like they've got a brand guideline, like all this is very impressive and not something that certainly existed when I was at school. So props to y'all and appreciate the opportunity to be here. Yeah, I guess I'll introduce myself. My name is Patrick. I live in Seattle. So I'm a fully remote designer for Reddit. I've only been there for about 5 months. So it's been kind of a new journey for me. I graduated UCLA in 2013. So I guess 8 years ago now. And went to the same program as Zeyu and Bijun, design media arts. What else? Favorite subreddit. My favorite subreddit is a subreddit called Formula Dank. I'm a Formula One fan, and Formula Dank is where everyone posts their dank memes about Formula One. So that's my favorite. All right, I will popcorn. Zay, you want to go next?
Yeah, sure, Patrick. So my name is Zeyu Ren. So I graduated from UCLA 2016, and also design media arts. I think I'm at Reddit for a year, but I think I have a very different route. I was like a game artist when I first graduated, and then I'm an animator at an animation studio for a while. And then I came to Reddit to be a motion designer. So I do a lot of motion stuff. And yeah, if you have any question regarding like taking a very different path, you can certainly ask me. And also I'm an international student. So yeah, ask me anything about like visa and all those options. Let me know. Yeah, really happy to be here. So Bijun, you're next.
Whoa, it is my turn. Also very happy to be here. Also great to see Chinmaya again. Got to chat with him once before, and it's been awesome. And every time I get to speak with like just people younger than me, and I'm just like, all this great booming talent that is coming onto our world. So for me, I am currently a designer on the video team at Reddit, and I've been here for about a year and a half. And before that, I was the only designer at a small tech startup. I started as a visual brand designer and transitioned into being a product designer. And Reddit is in fact just my second job out of college. So before that, I was at UCLA Design Media Arts, graduated same year as Zeyu in 2016. And my favorite subreddit would be Plant Clinic, because that was actually what brought me into Reddit in the first place, because my plants were dying. I could not find anywhere else in the world to figure out why my plants were dying, and there Reddit was. And I am from San Francisco. I went to UCLA and then I came back to San Francisco, and lo and behold, 2016, it just so happens that UX design, product design, and the whole Silicon Valley thing was at its peak boom. Or I guess it's still booming right now. That is me.
That all sounds so awesome, and thank you so much for those like detailed intros. Also, Zeyu, international student represent. I see you. I'm also an international student, so that really resonates with me. But yeah, I kind of wanted to move on to the next phase of this like discussion, which would be talking about your journeys a little bit. So like, you know what? Let's start with like something specific. So let's start with Patrick. Patrick, how did you get introduced to design? Like, what about design hooked you when you were like starting out?
I guess the first thing that hooked me was drawing in the first place. And I didn't know necessarily about graphic design or any kind of digital visual tools, but when I was in high school, I decided I wanted to design a t-shirt for my class council, and my friend was like, hey, there's this tool. And they have, it's called Illustrator, and Illustrator has something called Live Trace, and they can just trace your drawings. And like, of course, like looking back now, it's absolutely terrible, but that like opened up to my mind to say like, oh my gosh, there's a whole like digital realm out there in which I can do visual things. And that was kind of my like, my entree into design and visual arts. I definitely don't have like a traditional art background at all. But yeah, that kind of got me interested. And then going to UCLA, like I still didn't know what I wanted to do, was undeclared, and just happened to like be lucky that UCLA had this great design and media arts program that is an awesome blend of kind of art and design, and some conceptual, some practical. And yeah, that's how I got into it. And then in terms of like transitioning into product design, it was also kind of a just lucky happenstance circumstances. But I started interning at a design agency in LA that's also started by another UCLA alumnus called Very Nice, a Very Nice design company. And there we just started doing like a little bit of like web design, a little bit light touch of digital things. And when I was done with interning there, I saw on Facebook like, hey, IBM is hiring, you know, and I just applied, and like kind of zero product design experience, but they had a really big program of folks that they wanted to educate and bring up into enterprise design. And so yeah, just kind of got my break there, and was able to kind of onboard into a more technical product design role. And yeah, that was kind of my journey so far. And then getting to Reddit has been kind of an exploration of going from like very technical enterprise stuff to wanting to work on more delightful, exciting consumer stuff. So like after I left IBM, I went to work for Xbox for a few years, and yeah, now I'm here at Reddit.
That's so awesome, man. My next question, like I think everybody can relate to this idea of like coming into college not fully sure what they want to do. And then like, it's so great that you found such like a fulfilling path for you out of that. But like my next question probably be for Bijun. So what do you think was the most useful design skill or concept that you learned when you were a student? Like Patrick, Zeyu, feel free to chime in as well if you have one. But like, is there anything that you ended up having to learn when you entered industry that you kind of wish you learned when you were a student? Like so where did that balance sort of lie with you guys?
Cool. So truth be told, when I graduated UCLA, I had absolutely no idea what the hell I was going to be doing. I thought I was a jack of all trades. I was a little bit good at various things, was not sure if I had that specialized skill that I can go out there and be like, hey, I'm really great at this. Hire me. And it's also kind of a shitty feeling, right? When you're graduating, it's like, oh, now my goal in my life is trying to make myself profitable. But I think what was great about UCLA, especially the design program, now that I reflect back, is that the artistic direction and creative direction and the wild ideas in terms of creativity has been a great asset for myself personally. I think in a lot of different other design programs, or even like those UX boot camps that are so popular in the past few years, they teach you all about process. Here's what you do, 1, 2, 3, 4. But the reality of the design process is that it's never that linear. You might be thrown in halfway through. You might be thrown in on the 3rd iteration. You might be thrown in at any stage of it. And what comes out at the end is like, you could have come out with something awesome in 10 minutes. And that end result is what's going to get you there. You don't have to focus so much on all of these, like, oh, but I haven't learned the like super inner workings of XYZ, and then you don't feel as confident about it. Like, come in, just be excited. I think how we have been talking about looking for new talent at Reddit for the most part recently, it's not about experience. And also like that whole like, oh, you must have 2 years of experience, we, at least at Reddit right now, think about both talent and experience. So if we can see that, hey, this person might not know too much about product design quite yet, but their work is just great. Like, you can see that they can communicate well, they have great ideas, and there might be a role for that person. So I personally just think like, just be you. Like, there's always a place for you. And if you get hired in a place that you find that, oh, you're just trying to like push yourself in, or if I don't even know if that's the right place for me, it's a two-way street, right? Like, you don't want to be there in the first place.
No, that makes so much sense. Like, thank you for sharing that with me. That was like, that makes a lot of sense. Like, so you're kind of talking about how a lot of people kind of drill this linear process into you, but like nothing ever has to be that linear. It's more about kind of just as important as process is also vision, like trying to learn how to expand that vision out. Is that that's kind of the vibe I'm picking up from what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, I think my next one I'd like to shoot mainly to Zeyu, but like as always, both of you can like chime in if you have like something in particular to say. Like, how did like your experience as a game animator and like a game designer kind of help you sort of prepare for working at a major tech company? Like, how did you deal with team dynamics or like different levels of responsibility from that?
Yeah, so when I was graduating, I think, man, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I could be a game designer or a game artist. I could do some illustrations. I could, daily Bruins, that kind of thing I did. Why not? And I think, oh, maybe I can do some product designs, like UX stuff. I have some portfolio, but also I can do lots of things. But then when I reflect on this concept, I found that when I'm really younger, like when everyone is younger, they think there's every option is open to them. Like you can be an astronaut or director, and there's no limits. But when you graduate from college, you have this certain skill sets, but you still don't want to just limit to one path. So you still want to keep every option open. And that's what happened to my like portfolio by then. Is like so diverse, just a little bit of everything. Design media arts, like kind of every subject of designs, but you only know so much. But then when I start to get my first like game art job is actually through the game design class at DMA. Those the tabletop games we made back then. Actually, they work because when you organize all of your work into different portfolios, like one is targeting like only game companies and one is targeting to only animation studios, and they will think you are a very concentrated person, like you only do animation, and those game companies think, oh, you only do illustration. So that's kind of the strategy I use back then, is just to have different portfolios because you have a diverse skills, and that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. It's just from hiring perspective, they want you to be really focused, but you are only an undergrad. How focused can you be, right? So you have to really prepare for your like interviews and those. So back to your question is that at first I became a game like artist, but this trained me to work with other people because game was made of like by a lot of people. So you need to work with engineers, you have to work with the actual designers and writers. So that's actually the same kind of structure and mental structure throughout. Like today on Reddit, you have to work with the engineers, you have to work with writers. It's the same thing, but that lets you learn how to work with others and how to communicate. And that's a very important lesson. And also when you start working, I think you start to realize what work really is, because before you get into the game industry, you might just think about, wow, it's just playing game all day or it's all fun stuff. But actually there's a lot of mundane, boring thing you have to do every day. It's very repetitive. And then you realize if it continues for the next 10 years, you really have to find the fun in doing something. And then you really look into like what you really want to do. That's why I kind of change different jobs later. I just want to try out different things. The first job I worked in Tencent. It's a large company. So the next job I went to a small studio. It's called Black Math. They only do animation and crazy weird stuff. And then I find the middle point. I want something crazy and weird, but also I want to work with more people. So I come to Reddit, and this is a perfect place for me. So that's my journey.
That's so awesome. There's so much to unpack there, but like there's too many questions to ask and not enough time to ask them. So like I gotta move on without like tapping deeper into that. But yeah, I kind of wanted to move on to talking a little bit more about your work style at Reddit now. Like the first thing I want to ask is what exactly is the design process like at Reddit? So for example, how long does it generally take to ideate something or like create a new solution, and what's the timeline there to get something like that approved, or what's the success rate? Like just give me the deets on what the design
I mean,
like.
it's very organic, very unstructured, and the process can be anything from a day to like 2 years. Like we talked about on our team today, like, hey, we ideated on, designed, and released a test in the product, over the course of a day. So like that can happen. And then there's also features that like take forever to go through that process. We recently announced some like Clubhouse like features, audio features to be able to talk with your community this week. And like that is something that the team started a long time ago in concept land, and eventually and just now it's kind of like coming to fruition. So it's a little bit of everything. Like I would say day-to-day stuff, it's like more measurable, like 2 to 3 months of work or something like that. But it really depends on the time frame and range of project. But Bijun and Zeyu probably have more context there as well.
Of course, I'd love to hear a little bit about the context that Bijun and Zeyu have on this as well, because it's a very meaty question.
Yeah, I think having this like what is the design process is never really like a question, like a question that can be answered. It's like, here is the process, because every project is going to be different. I think, yeah, Pichu mentioned, sometimes you might just sit together for 30 minutes and you have to just come out with 100 ideas like on the spot, right? Like as you sit together with your team. Other times you can't move on for 3 years because of X, Y, and Z variables, and you're still trying to push for it to happen over and over again. So I think a good piece of design also is that communication aspect and how much you are able to bring the other departments of the company alongside your vision. And also like timing and like strategic visioning, executive decision making, all of that jazz, to see like when is the right time for certain ideas and when is it not.
So I'm hearing it's a combination of something very free form, where like you don't have necessarily a one size fits all solution, and also a lot of like a balancing act between like the ideas you come up with and the feasibility of how they can be taken forward, and you kind of having to play that waiting game as well, trying to communicate to facilitate them. This is kind of what I'm hearing. That be safe to say that's kind of the key takeaway?
Yeah, I think what else, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say yes. I think that's about right for Reddit, and I'll just like bring another perspective, which is like not every company works this way, this organically. Like when I was at IBM, they were very deliberate about having a design thinking process that had shared vocabulary, shared steps, shared everything from A to Z. Like, you know, it was like, hey, here are the 4 like key components of design thinking. Like, here's what happens when you converge and diverge, and like, here are the components that you need to be able to create like a hypothesis. And you know, design can work that way too. But all in all, I would say even inside constraints like that, you have to figure out what's right for your project, what's right for the personnel that you're working with, what's right for the technology that you have or don't have. All of these things like require you to make trade-offs in terms of like how you work. But yeah, Reddit's definitely way more on the organic side, at least at this current size.
I completely get what you're talking about. Like, so of course, since Reddit doesn't necessarily have an organic system, or like, sorry, not organic. I mean, it doesn't have a linear system when it comes to like a design process. Let's talk about something a little bit easier to structure, which is like, what does a day at work look like for you? Like, I'll ask you this, Zay. Like, what does your average day at work look like? Like, take us through like what you kind of do in a day. Like it could be different, but like just I don't know.
Yeah, I got you.
What it's like to be you.
Yeah, I got you. So I'm kind of different. I'm a motion designer or like designer, but mostly doing motion. So I'm more like cross-functional. So on Reddit team, there's a lot of things that are going on. So we have a great research team, UX research team. So they always knows like what problems of Reddit product and what needs to be fixed. So that's why all the teams are working on different features, and they want to make sure this feature gets, you know, picked up and then and shipped. So I always like involved in like the early stage, like Bijun might start a doc and say, oh, it's brainstorm session and everyone should input their ideas. And then we will all come together and, you know, a day in the work. For me, like that might be morning. We were all in this meeting and we just input our thoughts. Like like for example, that voice chat thing. We may say, oh, we want it to be so much different than the other ones. We want it to be really cool, and we just wrote that. That may be useful, maybe not, but we definitely just put out all our thoughts in there. And then there might be someone just telling you like, oh, we need some motion designs on this product. It's going to be announced soon, so we need a video about it. Or they say, oh, we need there's a micro interaction. We need some icon animation or something like that. So it's anything related to motion. They might come to me and they want to request it and they want to have it, and I will working on it. And then in the afternoon, there might be meetings that's about reviewing. So there might be a product that's being iterated a lot of times, and there's finally time for everyone to see it, and people can start, you know, give feedback, critique, think what can be better. So it's usually a bigger meeting that everyone can jam in. So there's a lot of different size meetings. Like sometimes it's only within the design group, or even smaller teams, like 5 people. We are in a working session, which is talk about a certain feature and your work in progress things. So those are I would say the day. Then in the afternoon, we will start have another meeting. We give shout outs. We give kind of a feedback to our colleagues, and that will be the end of the day. Yeah.
So what's the sweetest thing somebody said about you in a shout out?
Oh, there are some really good ones. Especially I can like save them from one of those like reviews. They will be really happy. yeah, but I really like also thankful for them to give me chance to work on some really cool projects. Yeah, I think like Patrick got a lot to say in that because him and Bijun working on some really new features, and I can't wait to hear their days.
Yeah, Patrick, Bijun, do you guys concur in terms of like how your days goes, or like do you guys have any major departures? Dish.
I think it's easier for me to go on a weekly basis than a daily
Okay.
basis.
Okay, sure.
What the design team is usually structured by is we have the design team, our product teams that we work through, and then maybe like the side secret projects that might just come to us directly from like whoever. And so we have a weekly check-in for design crit with the design team. We have a weekly crit with our product teams. We have internal small group working sessions that we jam together organically. And we also have just general kickoff stand-ups. What are we doing? What are we prioritizing? Types of meetings at the beginning or at the end of weeks usually. How it usually happens in the middle of the week is we would be doing our own work, or we might be jamming with each other, or we would be doing research or reaching out to people ourselves to really gather all of the information. And usually throughout the week, there would also be interviews where we would sit in, like we're trying to see, oh, who's coming onto the team. So there's those kind of things as well. I'd say meetings wise, it's really been taking up at least half of my week already, because a lot of our job is communicating with the other team members. So, and the rest of the time when you get to actually sit down and design, you have to be able to spend a good portion of it designing the presentation and how you're going to talk about your ideas as well. So your actual design time is not that much. So you just have to go very quickly, or you have to be very efficient or collaborative with your other designers. So that's my week usually.
That sounds so hefty, but like also really fun. There's a lot of, I'm hearing a lot of like idea jams in these weeks. It's very much about being creative when it comes to like creating sort of concepts. So yeah, sorry about that.
Oh, you're
but yeah.
fine.
So Patrick, do you kind of concur? Do you have anything to add there?
No, I think Bijun nailed it right on the head. I would say something that's important to think about as you transition from kind of student work to professional work is like some of your most invested time and most important relationships that you cultivate are with non designers or people that are outside of your discipline. I think we're speaking to like a lot of different disciplines here, but some of the best relationships that I've built like in my career are with developers or with PMs. And so I would say the more that you can build that muscle of working outside your discipline, I think will help you in the day-to-day. I think something that was tough at DMA and maybe transitioning was that when we did critiques, it was all to other DMA folks. And so like everyone took an artistic mindset, took a conceptual mindset, and there were differences, but fundamentally, I think we were thinking the same. And as Bijun mentioned, like a lot of our life is now spent kind of figuring out how to message things to more cross-disciplinary folks and get them on the same kind of wavelength that we're going, and get them to be equal stakeholders in the thing that we want to make. So yeah, I would say that's like my addition to the day-to-day, is that a lot of it is like, while a lot of it's spent with designers, like probably the majority of it is spent with non-designers.
Amir, you have to do a lot of like translation. Like you can't use the same kind of design jargon that you'd use with a designer. You have to kind of simplify that and abstract that out to somebody that doesn't necessarily have that same vocabulary, right?
Totally. And I think like something that I try to use, and that someone told me once, was like thinking about a spectrum of like heart and head. Like what are things that pull at your heartstrings, and what type of people respond to those things, and then what are things that are very cerebral and maybe data driven and logical, and how can you use the head side of things to convey what you want to do. And so just thinking about like how you balance that spectrum in your day-to-day work is something that's important.
Thank you so much for that answer. Like, I think that's something I'm probably going to take with me beyond this like discussion, probably like throughout my own career. Just the idea of thinking both with heart and head and observing who responds to what more. It's actually a very profound thing about connection. But yeah, too many questions. We got to go on. But so I kind of want to get to the last stage of my questions, which would be more about reflections on kind of your own journeys as designers, kind of the stuff you've learned, the nature of how you've learned, or like the kinds of designs you like, basically the people that you grew to be through this design journey. So like the first one, and I think the most important one I'd like to ask is, how much do you guys feel like you're still learning? Because you guys are designers and technologists in industry right now. So how do you make sure you're always growing as a designer, even when you have all of those sort of years and all that experience behind you? Do you ever feel like you're at a point where you're stagnant, or do you feel like there's just always so much you don't know? So this could go for anyone, but like, Bijun, you go first.
Sure. Yes, always learning. And if I'm not learning, I'm switching jobs. That's what happens. Because that's why I switched out of my last job, because I felt like I was not growing enough. And whenever you get to meet new people, new problems, you're always going to learn just through the nature of going through these different actions and projects that you're going to do. What's great is that usually when you're on a company, they have these kind of professional development roadmaps for you as well, and goal sets that you can have for yourself to talk with your managers and to track whether you're progressing in certain things that you want to be better at. Like say, myself, for example, you can think about design in terms of craft or visioning or creativity or communication. There are so many different aspects that you can never be best at all of them. And so we recently had a feedback session across the entire Reddit org, and we might identify some things that are strengths. And so we should always be drilling into what are we best at and be the top of class in the world. And that's where you want to be striving towards. But of course, there's also rooms for improvement. It's like for example, sometimes I just don't make sense when I present. Like I just get too excited, I just go crazy, or like it's too overwhelming for folks. And there are always these things that you can learn from your peers, and also just from observing like Zeyu and Patrick when they talk, or how they go about design, that you can be adding to your own skill set. But yeah, I've never felt that there's not much left for me to learn. Like there's just so much out there.
I'm very curious to see what Patrick might have to say about that, because like he's kind of the most experienced designer on the panel right now. So do you have like a differing experience?
No,
or
I mean, not really. No, I think like 8 years into a design career, I still feel like, yeah, there's like growth areas for me in every single kind of discipline. Yeah, I think like, I think there's a super positive side to it, which is like, there's always room to grow, and there's room to improve, and there's always a way to hone your skill. There's also a negative side to it, which is like, I think like 8 years down the road, there's still imposter syndrome, and there's still kind of like that question of like, do I belong here? Do I have enough skills to like deserve the job that I have or the title that I have? I think like all of that is just like an undercurrent of like being a professional, and especially someone in the creative field, where it's very much it's not necessarily like a to B translation and a clear like problem to solve. It's always a tough amorphous thing. And so, yeah, I think like I feel the same as Bijun. Like with a couple more years, I don't think the perspective changes. I think maybe the only thing that changes is you start to know yourself a little bit better, and maybe those things that you're good at and the things that you aren't good at become a little more salient. That doesn't mean you can't improve in them, but I think it does give you opportunities to lead into those and be the best advocate for like, you know, those skill sets. So yeah. What about you, Zeyu?
That's a good thing about working in the tech industry is that it pushes you to learn new things. You even if you're very lazy and you don't want to learn things, the new updates of software always like requires you to learn it. Like for example, in Figma, there's when people starting use components, you gotta know how to use them. Otherwise, you cannot work at all. And you know, those companies are gonna keep updating their softwares. You have to always keep track of it. Like After Effects, it's been so many years I learned After Effects, but I still learning new things. There's always new plugins replacing old plugins. So that's why you want to go to a tech industry, because instead of some traditional industries that you can actually be laid back and not learning things and it's still okay. In tech industries, you kind of really be pushed to do those things, which is really good. You always feel like you're in school and you always want to learn.
I love how much emphasis there is on learning here. Like the fact that you're kind of a lifelong learner, like there is no way you can be an expert in something so vast. Like I think we as students often get pressured with the idea that we have to know everything right off the bat. And like we need to be experts in just about any field that we can think of, when like realistically that's not like possible. We have limited resources, we have limited time, energy, etc. But like for like beginning students, because a lot of us right now are students that are exploring design, and that's kind of everybody that's watching us talk right now. So what kind of advice would you guys give to someone starting out in design? Like this could be some of the best advice you've ever received, or it could be some advice you wish you'd received when you were a student and you were just learning how to design. So like if you had to reduce it to like a brief mantra or like a brief like nugget of wisdom, like what's kind of a core principle you'd share?
This is maybe not like the best core principle, but just what's off the top of my head, which is like when we've looked at a lot of new designers coming into the industry, I think something that can be lacking is just a great understanding of design fundamentals. So that's like type, color, form. You know, I think like people go into boot camps, and so like their first visual thing that they've made is like a user interface, but there's design fundamentals that can be abstracted past that. So I think like investing the time to really get a good understanding of the fundamentals and some practice in that area before like designing your first interface is super important. And I think is huge value. Like, you know, I still think about, you know, kerning and line height, like in just day-to-day things that I do today. And I don't think that, you know, had I not gained like some typography background, would I necessarily be, you know, thinking about those things. So the fundamentals are super important.
Bijun, what about you? Do you have a kernel of wisdom?
Kernel of wisdom.
It could just be something that you wish somebody told you when you were at the beginning.
I'd say don't believe in those resume requirements. Don't believe in them. Like whatever it is, like there are plenty of people who I have interviewed and seen with 10 years, 15 years of experience, and they're just not good. And I've seen people with like no experience and they're amazing. And so believe in yourself and like know what you personally enjoy doing and actually maybe go to places that you're passionate about, because that comes through very clearly once you start seeing and talking to folks.
Understood. Zeyu, what about you? Close this off before we go to audience questions.
Yeah, the advice I would give myself is to cherish the graduate exhibition, like you know, the work you do when you graduate, because that's the moment where everyone is helping you and where all the resources is kind of helping you to do this one thing. and I think I could like really make that like so much better, because I just when I think back, that was the time where all the creative freedoms unleashed, and it's really hardly any that opportunity anymore later, because like for me, when I go to like animation studios, it's do some commercial works and some more less exciting thing. So I think if you haven't graduated yet, just make sure you seize that opportunity. All your professors and all, you can even reach out to some actors or like voiceovers, and all of those people will help you. And I think that's like opportunities you can definitely seize. And you don't need to do some UX things, because when we interview other people, we definitely see their creative stuff as well. So this is definitely the moment you want to show the you in the work. Meanwhile, definitely prepare similar kind of work, which is UX portfolio. That's something you do after you finish your day of school. You have to prepare that, because if you put in the work, you can start to have that portfolio. Otherwise, you're not gonna have that portfolio. I think also Bijun says like some people even have a long school, like they graduate school a long time, but they don't have a portfolio. It's because they have very unfocused portfolios. They really need to really put out into the companies they are applying to. Like if you're applying to a social media company, you definitely need at least like 3 kind of work, like design work related to that. So that's something you have to do after school. So that's kind of the advice given to myself, is to seize the days while you're still in school to do really creative stuff, but also work really hard after school to do the work that can get you hired. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. With that, I'd like to sort of turn over to our audience who have questions of their own. So they've been submitting questions through a Q&A board, and they've kind of been voting up questions they really like. And like, I think I got my first one queued up right here. I mean, this is the one about whether it's more important to practice technical skill versus design thinking. So if you ask that question, I don't have your name, but like if you ask that question, you want to ask it yourself, like go ahead. I'll just give you like 10 seconds, and then otherwise I'll just like ask it.
Yeah, sure. It was me. Sorry. Hi, my name's Kelly. And yeah, I want to ask, do you think it's more important to practice technical skill design or design thinking? Oh, it was for anyone.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a good question. I don't think it has a clear answer necessarily. I think it depends on what type of jobs and roles you think you might want to have. When I think about folks that are particularly strong in design thinking, I think that they are more suited for roles that are more strategic or more cross-disciplinary, or are more about facilitation, or more about like distilling a big set of ideas into a smaller one. And then when I think about folks that are great at technical skills, I think about, people who are really great at craft, people who make beautiful experiences in UI, people who create delightful micro interactions like Zeyu. And so you can be both, but it is hard to be both at the same time. So, I would say like, as you think about a product design career, you're going to exercise both muscles, but I don't think there's necessarily a clear answer, like without knowing who you are and what types of things you want to do, about what you might want to focus more on.
I think that's a great answer in itself. Like it's it is based on your own priorities as a designer. That's what I'm hearing. So like, yeah, I mean, I guess to our next audience question, this seems like more of a general one, but do you have any key bits of advice for like how one would land their first internship or first entry level like design position? Are there any mistakes you see people making over and over again that you wish they'd stop doing? Like, do you have any like bits of advice that you wish people would just act on more? I'm gonna ask Bijun this.
Yeah, there is one that I can think about. And it's a lot of times when people go into interviews or when they're doing portfolios, I think because there's so many resources out there now, that's like, here's how you make your portfolio. Here's how you do a whiteboard. Here's how you do an interview. And you just follow through this step 1 to 5. And at the end of it, you kind of lose yourself when you are actually there. And for me, being someone that is listening on the other side of the spectrum, it's like, that's great. I've heard this step 1 to 5 from 20 other people in the exact same way. But who are you? Like, I need to know who you are. And I think that's something that I want to remind myself as I continue as well.
That's a really good answer. Tie the process you use to like your own values and who you are as a person, right? That makes a lot of sense. So here's another one that's actually a very, it's a big heater. I like this one. What's something that you've designed at Reddit? You know, I'm gonna ask Patrick this one. What's something that you've like worked on?
Oh God.
Unless it's under NDA, then you can't do it.
No, that's fine. I haven't been here that long, so the amount of things that I've shipped is like, you know, counted on one hand. But yeah, I think the main thing that I work on is community growth. So basically, how do you what happens after you create a community on Reddit, and how do you grow from that moment to, you know, a productive place where people can feel belonging, people can have conversation, people can interact with each other. And so, yeah, the latest thing that I worked on was basically a how-to for new community creators. So basically a set of steps for them to go through that's like, you know, what do I do when I hit that create a community button? What are the most important things to do on day one? What are the most important things to do in my first week? And then past that. So yeah.
That's so awesome. Damn, that's so crazy. Jeez. And I know that Bijun works on video, and like, do you work on live streaming too then? I read it.
I was not the person to have like released or developed that platform, but yes, I have worked on the live streaming side of things as well.
Yeah, we've got some real talented people in the on the panel, folks. Zeyu, can you tell us about something you worked on?
Yeah, animation, the things that moves on Reddit. Like for example, when you load the live stream on Reddit, the R-pen animation made by me, and also there are some micro animation, like some present stuff and some many things. Like many of them are like early stages. I try to like make prototype for them. So that sometimes they are implemented into the final product. Sometimes they are reduced. Like we want to make sure the motion are not too much. But in the very beginning, in the ideation phase, people want to, you know, exaggerate and want to show their features. That's where I help them to make things pop. Yeah, basically animation is the things I made here. I read it.
I think all these answers are gonna change how I use Reddit personally. Like, I'll be like, oh my god, I know who made this, I know who made that. Oh my god, I'm gonna start freaking out. But yeah, so this one's a really cute one. It's also really a quick one, but like this one person is asking, can I follow you guys on Twitter? I don't know, can they? It's up to you. Drop your Twitter in the chat. You're like,
you can follow me, but I don't promise any like quality of tweet. So I'm not very good at Twitter.
That's all good. Oh, like I know this one is okay. No, I found one that's like, that's something I've been meaning to ask for ages because it's something I cannot get over. What color is the upvote arrow? It's like, is it red or is it orange? What color do you think it is? Because like this has been a huge point of contention on like Reddit, like inside the communities. Just like nobody understands what to classify it as. So what's your opinion on this? All y'all.
I mean, it's hex code FF4500. So take that for what you will. It's orange red.
Ah, perfect diplomatic answer. I respect it. Okay, here's one that's also really nice. How has working in design changed your view on like everyday things that you look at? How has it changed the way you look at things you see around your room or like in your workplace or like where you go, the place you go out?
I can take that. So I think it's reverse. It's like how you look at everyday stuff changes how you think of designs. That's kind of the thing. Like the first question about technical skills and design thinking, it's actually not, training on your design thinking. That's a false like statement. It's actually training on thinking itself. It's like, what do you think about like COVID? How it changed people's lifestyle and what industry it affects? And when you open a game, you think, oh, how this shop lure you into buying more coins and buy more skins. And those little moments in life train your brain to think about products, to think about how people interact with people. And then somehow when you design stuff at Reddit, when you start working, those knowledge like come in and they actually help you to design stuff or critique stuff. And when we see a project, there's something wrong with it, you can immediately spot what's wrong with it because you are a user and you think about those everyday stuff before you join Reddit. And now it become part of your thinking and you can apply those. So, design thinking is not just about design layouts, color, and all of those design specific things. It's all about this, general problem solving skills you're gonna have. So that's why all of those two, I would definitely concentrate on like how to build a portfolio, but definitely always think when you look at any problem in life, even if it's like a political thing, like you want to think, oh, why people vote for someone or why this thing happens. And those questions you're going to continue to ask yourself and give your answers. I think that's how, thinking about everyday stuff affects your designs. Yeah.
I really like that. Like design thinking isn't just design thinking, it's thinking. It's like everyday things affect how you think, so everyday things will affect how you design. And it sometimes happens reciprocally. Or am I saying that word right? I don't know. But like, yeah, it sometimes happens like in both directions. But like, it's very important to consider how everyday things affects it. I completely agree with you. Here's one that I actually also really like. How did you guys explore design at UCLA besides being in the DESMA program? So like outside of DESMA, how did you sort of explore that world? I'll shoot this one to Patrick.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, being in LA, being in Southern California, you have kind of a huge set of riches in terms of creative things to explore. So, going to museums, going to art galleries, going to graphic design exhibitions, even the consumer products, like you have kind of like Kid Robot in LA. So like things to think about that you can be inspired by in the real world. There's an embarrassment of kind of riches in LA. So yeah, I would say like definitely step outside your design program or your design scope to find inspiration. For me, it was like, I don't know. I think I had other creative pursuits. Like I did like dance at UCLA and things like that, which isn't necessarily like.
What team were you on?
I was on a team called Samahong Modern.
You're on Samahong?
Yeah. So
okay, that's pretty crazy.
So different creative pursuits, but I think those definitely inform your design and creativity as well, as if you can actually thinking about what Zeyu said earlier of like doing creative and interesting work. Like, one of my senior thesis projects was like related to dance. And so like these aren't just like fun extracurriculars that, build your resume or just pad your schedule, but they are opportunities to bring in things that you care about into maybe something that could be a career. And yeah, so keep doing those things.
Is it too late for me to join Sama? No, but yeah, like, okay, like I'm recognizing we're at time now, so it is 7 p.m. So like technically the recording will stop now, but thank you guys so much for answering all of these questions we've had so far. I'm sorry if I didn't get to your questions because I haven't had a lot of time, but I'm going to drop their LinkedIns and emails in the event link, and you guys can feel free to reach out to them if you'd like to ask them those questions that I didn't get to, like for yourself. I wish design discussions never ended either. I wish we could pause time and just like talk about this stuff forever. But yeah, thank you guys so much for coming. I'm just gonna stop the recording now.